$42.22. That is the official price the United States Treasury assigns to one fine troy ounce of gold, not historical gold, not archived gold. The gold sitting right now in Fort Knox and West Point in Denver. The gold the United States government holds, 261.5 million troy ounces of it, is recorded on the government's books at $42.22 per ounce. As of the close of markets on February 27, 2026, the same ounce of gold trades on the open market at $5,246. That is not a rounding error. That is not a typo. That is a gap of over $5,000 per ounce, maintained on purpose, encoded in statute, and functioning exactly as designed. Before we go any further, if you find yourself wondering how this is possible and why no one seems to talk about the machinery behind it, hit subscribe and make sure the bell is on. This channel covers exactly these kinds of structural questions. Now, the question this video will answer: why would a modern state keep a price from the past on purpose? What does it protect? And what does it actually do to the balance sheet, to the dollar, and to every claim you have heard about so-called inevitable revaluation? Every claim in this video is tied to primary sources: Treasury gold reporting, published monthly by the Bureau of the Fiscal Service. The Federal Reserve's own published guidance on gold certificates, the original text of Executive Order 6102 from 1933, the Gold Reserve Act of 1934, Congressional Research Service analysis published in 2025, and a Federal Reserve staff note from August 2025 examining official reserve revaluations internationally. Those are the documents, not opinion, not commentary. By the end of this video, there is a working checklist for evaluating any gold revaluation claim, regardless of who is making it. Beyond that, what book value versus market value means for a government asset, what the price divergence is and what it costs to maintain it, and what the 1933 and 1971 precedents actually demonstrate and what they do not. Mechanism first, then the claims, then the checklist. Let us start with the basic architecture. There are two prices for the same gold. One is the book value, the number recorded on government balance sheets. The other is the market value, the number at which gold trades between willing buyers and sellers every second of every trading day. For almost every asset in the modern world, these two numbers stay reasonably close to each other. Banks are required to mark their trading portfolios to market. Public companies report asset values at or near current prices. When something appreciates significantly, the accounting reflects it. For the United States government's gold, this is not the case. The gold is not marked to market. The government records the gold at a price fixed by Congress in 1973, and Congress has not changed that price since. The price is $42.02 per fine troy ounce. The 2/9 is not an accident. It is a fraction that produced a specific decimal value in the original international currency accounting framework used during the demise of the Bretton Woods system, 42 2/9. It is a sentence from a different monetary world written into current law. Here is what it produces. 261.5 million ounces multiplied by $42.22 equals approximately $11 billion in book value on the government's records. 261.5 million ounces multiplied by $5,246. The market price as of February 27th, 2026 equals approximately $1,372 billion. Think about what that actually means. The gap between what the government records and what the market says is approximately $1,361 billion. That gap is not counted. It does not appear on the government's balance sheet. It is a statutory artifact, real in the market, invisible in the official accounting. Let that number sit for a second. So the open question is this: is this a hidden asset, or is it a public accounting convention serving a specific institutional purpose? That is not a rhetorical question. The answer has concrete legal and fiscal consequences, and those consequences are the story. Here is how it works technically. When the government records an asset at cost, or at a legislatively fixed price, it is using historical cost accounting. This is the opposite of mark-to-market accounting, where values update continuously with the market. For most sovereign gold holdings around the world, central banks use market value. The European Central Bank marks its gold quarterly at the London market fix. The Bank of England does the same. Most of the group of 10 central banks do. The United States government does not. The reason is specific to how American monetary gold is structured, and it is different from how any other country holds it. The physical gold is owned by the Treasury. The Treasury has issued gold certificates to the Federal Reserve. Those certificates give the Federal Reserve a claim on gold, not at market value, not at a floating price, but at the statutory price of $42.22 per ounce. The Federal Reserve carries those certificates on its balance sheet. By law, the value of the certificates the Fed holds cannot exceed the book value of the gold the Treasury holds. Let that sit for a second. This is where the mechanism gets precise. At the current statutory price, the Federal Reserve's gold certificates represent a claim on effectively all 261.5 million ounces in Treasury custody. If Congress raised the statutory price to match the market, those same $11 billion certificates would represent a claim on only a small fraction of the physical gold, roughly 2 million ounces, less than 1% of the current stock. The remaining 259 million ounces would become uncertified Treasury gold, no longer backing any Federal Reserve obligation. The bulls say this freed gold could be a fiscal windfall. Issue new certificates at the higher price, credit the Treasury's account, fund spending without new Treasury bonds. The bears say it destabilizes the institutional relationship between the Treasury and the Federal Reserve, signals dollar weakness to global markets, and generates uncertainty without producing real economic benefit. My take: both sides are capturing real considerations, and the tension between them is precisely why the statutory price has remained fixed for more than 50 years. Now let me take you to a concrete moment in history. April 5th, 1933. The United States is 3 years into the Great Depression. Bank runs, deflationary collapse, unemployment approaching 1 in 4 workers. Franklin Roosevelt had been president for less than a month. That morning, he signed Executive Order 6102. The order is titled, precisely, forbidding the hoarding of gold coin, gold bullion, and gold certificates within the continental United States. The authority cited was the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917, amended weeks earlier by the Emergency Banking Relief Act. What the order required: every person in the United States must deliver their gold coin, gold bullion, and gold certificates to a Federal Reserve Bank or a member bank by May 1st, 1933. In exchange, the paper equivalent of the then official gold price, $20.67 per fine troy ounce. Failure to comply carried penalties of up to $10,000 in fines, the equivalent of roughly $249,000 today, measured by the Consumer Price Index, or up to 10 years in prison. There were exemptions. Jewelers, artists, and certain professionals needed working stock. Collectors could keep coins with recognized special value. No individual could hold more than $100 in gold coin, about 4.8 troy ounces at the 1933 official price. Anyone thinking this sounds extreme is not wrong. The administration justified it as emergency stabilization of the banking system and the monetary framework. It was also highly controversial at the time and has been debated ever since. 9 months later, on January 30th, 1934, Congress passed the Gold Reserve Act. The act ratified the executive order, transferred all Federal Reserve gold to the Treasury, prohibited the Treasury and financial institutions from redeeming dollar bills for gold. And, this is the pivot, authorized the president to set the gold value of the dollar by proclamation. Roosevelt immediately exercised that authority. The new statutory gold price, $35 per fine troy ounce. That is not a coincidence. The government acquired gold from citizens and institutions at $20.67 per ounce. It then repriced the same gold at $35 per ounce. The one-time accounting gain was approximately $2.8 billion, a real and meaningful fiscal event in 1934 terms. That gain helped capitalize the newly created Exchange Stabilization Fund and expanded monetary headroom for the Federal Reserve. If this kind of source-driven analysis is useful to you, hit the like button. It tells the algorithm this work is worth distributing. Subscribe if you are not already. And if you know someone who asks questions like this, share it with them. Now back to the evidence. Pause and consider this precisely. The fence has been standing for 53 years. The question is not whether the fence is old. The question is what it was built to contain. What does the 1933 precedent actually demonstrate, and what does it not? It shows that Congress can legally change the statutory gold price. It shows that such a change alters the Treasury's accounting position in a specific documentable way. It shows the mechanism exists and has been used. What it does not show is that the same policy would produce identical results today, because the monetary system of 1934 was structurally different from the monetary system of 2026 in ways that matter enormously. The gold standard was operational. Citizens were expected to hold gold as money. The Federal Reserve's relationship to gold was different in scope and purpose. When the 1933 precedent is cited as proof that revaluation is straightforward today, the next question needs to be, what is the specific mechanism for today's system? Not the 1934 system, and what are the trade-offs that come with it? Now let me take you to the second precedent, August 15th, 1971, a Sunday evening. President Nixon addresses the nation. The context: since 1944, the Bretton Woods system had organized global finance around a dollar pegged to gold at $35 per ounce. Here is a distinction that most viral analysis skips entirely. The convertibility under Bretton Woods was not for American citizens. It was for foreign governments and foreign central banks. A French government holding dollars could take those dollars to the United States Treasury and exchange them for gold at $35 per ounce. A French citizen could not. An American citizen definitely could not. Private gold ownership had been illegal in the United States since Executive Order 6102 in 1933. So when the gold window closed on August 15, 1971, who specifically lost convertibility? Foreign central banks did. Countries that had trusted the $35 peg and accumulated dollar reserves found the promise suspended, effective immediately and without advance notice. The pressure had been building for years. By 1971, far more dollars were circulating abroad than could be backed by gold at $35 per ounce. The French government had been sending representatives to convert dollars to gold. West Germany had exited the Bretton Woods system weeks before Nixon's announcement. Britain formally requested the movement of $3 billion in gold from Fort Knox to the Federal Reserve in New York in the days immediately before the speech. The United States gold stock had fallen from over 20,000 metric tons after World War II to approximately 8,100 metric tons by 1971, a decline of more than half. Stop for a second and let the structure of this settle. The story of 1971 is not about gold's price being released into the market. The story is about the collapse of a promise system, the network of commitments, trust, and institutional agreements that gave the dollar its global role. Gold's price did not immediately float. It became a legal and diplomatic question managed through a series of international agreements over the following 2 years. The Smithsonian Agreement in December 1971 set the dollar price of gold at $38. The Value Modification Act in 1973 raised it to $42.22, where it remains today. By March 1973, the major currencies were floating against each other. And on December 31st, 1974, Public Law 93373 allowed American citizens to own gold again for the first time in 41 years. What does this precedent demonstrate? It shows that statutory prices can be changed by congressional action, and were changed twice between 1971 and 1973. It shows the process is politically and institutionally complex. What it does not demonstrate is that a revaluation today would produce equivalent effects, because the structure of global finance, the role of gold in central bank balance sheets, and the operational relationship between the Treasury and the Federal Reserve are materially different from what they were in 1973. Now let me address 4 specific claims that circulate widely around this topic. Each requires a method, a source, and a result. First claim: the official gold price has been frozen at $35 since 1971. This is factually incomplete. The statutory price was changed from $35 to $38 in December 1971, authorized by Congress through the Smithsonian Agreement framework. It was changed again from $38 to $42 and 2/9 in 1973 under the Value Modification Act. The price unchanged since 1973 is 42 and 22 cents, not 35. The distinction matters because the 2 changes already demonstrate that Congress has updated the statutory price twice in the modern era. That is claim 1. The record corrects itself. If you have been finding this useful, share it with one person who asks about gold and monetary policy. That is how this analysis reaches the people who need it most. And leave a comment below. What do you think would actually happen to gold prices if the statutory price were changed? I read every comment. Second claim: American citizens held physical gold throughout the 1970s as an inflation hedge. The legal timeline is specific. Executive Order 6102 came into effect May 1st, 1933. The private ownership ban was lifted effective December 31st, 1974. For the first 4 years of the 1970s, it remained a federal offense for most Americans to hold gold coin or bullion in significant quantity. The first year a citizen could legally purchase gold on the open market was 1975. Describing the 1970s, plural, as a period of available gold ownership requires the legal timeline. That is claim 2. The dates are not flexible. Third claim: Consumer price index analysis shows the dollar has effectively collapsed against gold. Here is the method and the distinction. Using Bureau of Labor Statistics CPI data, $1 in 1971 carries approximately the same purchasing power as $7.43 in 2026. That means the $35 gold price in 1971, adjusted purely for consumer inflation, would translate to approximately $260 today. Gold trades at $5,246. The difference between $260 and $5,246 is not explained by consumer price inflation. Gold has risen approximately 20 times beyond what CPI adjustment would predict. That is a real and significant fact. The reason for the gap is contested among economists and involves investment demand, reserve accumulation, currency confidence, and geopolitical risk premiums. The point is this: CPI adjustment explains part of gold's move, not all of it. And using CPI alone as your framework for understanding gold pricing overstates inflation as the explanatory variable. CPI is one lens. Gold has other lenses. Now, claim 4. Fourth claim. There is a 4-stage pattern in gold revaluation history, and the result is always the same. A Federal Reserve staff note published August 1st, 2025 examined every case in the past 30 years where a government used proceeds from official gold or foreign exchange reserve revaluations. The note found 5 cases: Germany, Italy, Lebanon, Curacao and St. Martin, and South Africa. 5 cases across 30 years. The outcomes varied significantly by fiscal context, legal framework, and institutional design. Lebanon in December 2002 used revaluation proceeds to retire approximately $1.8 billion in Treasury bills, about 11% of its gross domestic product at the time, under conditions of acute fiscal stress. The Federal Reserve note does not draw a universal conclusion. Specifically on South Africa, the most recent case, the note states it is too soon to assess whether the use of revaluation proceeds helped place fiscal policy on a more sustainable path. 5 data points, varying outcomes. That is the empirical foundation for the claim of a universal pattern. Read that again. 5 cases, 30 years, no universal conclusion. Now let me break down what a gold revaluation would actually do today, specifically. If Congress raised the statutory price from $42.22 to the current market price, approximately $5,200 per ounce, the Treasury would record an accounting gain of approximately $1,360 billion. To convert that into deployable funds, the Treasury could issue new gold certificates to the Federal Reserve at the higher price. The Federal Reserve would credit the Treasury General Account, the government's checking account at the Fed, by the amount of the new certificates. The Treasury could then spend from that account without issuing new Treasury bonds. Here is what that does and does not accomplish. It does mean the government's balance sheet shows more recorded assets. It does mean the Treasury could fund a specific, bounded level of spending without additional debt issuance. The United States currently holds approximately $36 trillion in outstanding federal debt. The potential revaluation gain of $1,360 billion represents roughly 4% of total debt. Not a debt elimination, not a reset, one time, 4%. What it does not do: it does not lock gold's price at the new level. It does not automatically depreciate or stabilize the dollar. It does not cancel any outstanding obligation in the way that retiring bonds through normal repurchase would. It does not create a new gold-backed currency. What it does, precisely and narrowly, is change a book value and make available a specific amount of new Treasury spending capacity through an established accounting mechanism. For reference, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent stated in February 2025 that the administration would, in his words, monetize the asset side of the balance sheet. He clarified the following month, and these are his words: "We are not revaluing the gold." That statement is on record. Policy intentions can change. But as of the date this script was written, February 28, 2026, no statutory change has been announced, and the statutory price remains $42.22. This is educational, not financial advice. The data is what it is. The mechanism is what it is. Let me give you the core insight this episode has been building toward. The real gap is not between gold and the dollar. It is between the market price and the legal accounting rule. And in official reality, the rule decides what the number means. When someone claims the government is sitting on $1 trillion gold asset that nobody is counting, they are accurately describing the accounting gap. When someone claims revaluation would immediately eliminate the national debt, or restore a gold standard, or produce the same outcome as 1933, they are describing something the mechanism does not currently support. Those two statements are not the same argument. Conflating them is where most of the viral analysis on this topic breaks down. Here is your 3-question checklist for evaluating any gold revaluation claim. Ask first, what specific legal mechanism would execute this change? Not the story, the statute. Congressional action, specific bill, specific price. What is the sequence of events that would have to happen? Ask second, what is the evidence trail for the claimed outcome? If the claim is that revaluation eliminates debt, ask for the accounting steps between the certificate issuance and the debt reduction, because in the current legal framework, those steps do not automatically connect. Ask third, what are the trade-offs? Every country that has used revaluation gains in the past 30 years did so under specific conditions and accepted specific consequences. What are the equivalent trade-offs for the United States in 2026? The machinery of the statutory gold price is not a typo. It is not an artifact anyone forgot to update. It is a set of rules that govern what the number means, who controls what when prices change, and what the accounting consequences are for both the Treasury and the Federal Reserve. Understanding the rules is the difference between reading the headline and understanding the system. If you want to go deeper on the international monetary mechanisms we have covered today, Bretton Woods, the Exchange Stabilization Fund, and the role of gold certificates in the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, subscribe and hit the bell. And if you think someone in your network should understand how official gold accounting actually works before they make decisions based on the viral version, send it to them. That is the entire point of this channel.